Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
I'm John Strum, and this is RealTalk MS. It's July 9th, and we have a lot to talk about. When MS impacted the lives of my guests, Mike Zimits and Tsigakos, they found cycling. And they each went from being a newbie on a bike to riding several stages of the Tour de France. Having already pedaled several thousand miles and raised more than $1 million for MS research, Mike and Catherine are two MS warriors who continue to show the world that an MS diagnosis doesn't mean that you're no longer entitled to have hopes, dreams, and goals. After a hiatus to address some serious life issues, they're gearing up for a couple of bike rides this fall. And you can join them, and you can support them. But before we get to my conversation with Mike and Catherine, there are a few other things that you should know about. World MS Day took place this past May 30th. If you're a regular listener, you might remember we had Per Benecke, the CEO of the MS International Federation, on the podcast to talk about it. I wanted to circle back to World MS Day for a minute, because I know that sometimes it's easy to overlook the fact that there are a few million people all around the world who are living with MS. I think that concept becomes easier to wrap your head around when you consider that this year, on World MS Day, there were over 400 events in 79 countries, all taking place to raise awareness about multiple sclerosis. For instance, the Northern Morocco MS Association, HANA Multiple Sclerosis Patients Association, and the Moroccan Association for People Affected by MS used World MS Day as a platform to collect signatures for their Access to Treatment advocacy campaign. ARFA MS Society in Saudi Arabia downloaded the World MS Day toolkit from the MS International Federation and used it on social media to appeal to their Ministry of Health for support and recognition. And they were successful. The Ministry of Health posted about the invisible symptoms of MS on their Twitter account. The Deputy Minister of Health in Macedonia attended a World MS Day event organized by the National Association for MS in Macedonia, and the Deputy Minister of Health pledged his support for people with MS in the Macedonian healthcare system. Thanks to the efforts of the Spanish MS Society, Spain's Prime Minister shared the #MyInvisibleMS video on social media. MS associations across Bosnia and Herzegovina came together to host World MS Day photography exhibitions in 4 cities. MS Team Croatia organized an MS walk in Zagreb. The event included a presentation, a Pilates session. They even had a DJ. Even American actress Selma Blair posted about World MS Day on Instagram. Hundreds of events, social media shout-outs, and recognition from celebrities, politicians, and people affected by MS serve to raise global awareness about MS and remind each of us that we aren't alone. If you've been listening to the podcast over the past couple of weeks, you've probably grown weary of hearing me pound away at the companies and the doctors who run these stem cell clinics that offer treatments without even a shred of scientific proof that their treatments actually work. These stem cell clinics just seem to exist so that their owners can steal as much money as they can from highly vulnerable people who are desperately hoping for a cure for their MS, their Parkinson's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and pretty much any other chronic illness that you can think of. These so-called clinics claim that their stem cell treatments cure just about, well, everything, even erectile dysfunction. And by now, you may be getting the incorrect impression that I have something against stem cell research or stem cell treatments. I don't. Not even a little bit. I have a lot against the con men who are operating these so-called clinics, but it feels like I was overdue to talk about some positive news as it relates to legitimate stem cell research. And today is the most perfect day to do that, because today, July 9th, stem cells taken from Parkinson's patients and MS patients are blasting off into outer space. They won't be exploring strange new worlds, and they won't be seeking out new life and new civilizations. But they will be boldly going where no stem cells have gone before, to the International Space Station. These stem cells are part of a research study titled The Effects of Microgravity on Microglia Three-Dimensional Models of Parkinson's Disease and Multiple Sclerosis. Scientists have already learned that exposure to microgravity and radiation, the type that occurs on the International Space Station, well, it affects human cells. Exactly how and to what degree, well, that's still to be determined, but physiological alterations to the cells actually occur. We also know that cells have to interact with other cells in order for neuronal communication to occur. Well, this is exactly the kind of communication that gets disrupted by demyelination, leading to MS disability. What scientists don't know is how this cell-to-cell interaction is impacted or influenced by microgravity. And this study could provide brand new approaches to understanding this cell-to-cell interaction and developing new therapies for Parkinson's disease and MS. So we can no longer say that researchers are willing to go to the ends of the earth to solve MS, because as of today, they're willing to explore the entire universe to find answers. If you'd like to find out more about this first-of-its-kind research, I'll include a link to the research documents on NASA's website in today's show notes. The ability to use your hands and arms is critical to being able to independently perform activities of daily living. And the loss of upper limb function often occurs as MS disability progresses. Rehabilitation specialists have found that task-oriented training promotes functional recovery for people living with MS. Now, task-oriented training involves practicing real-life tasks with the intention of acquiring or reacquiring a specific skill. But what hadn't yet been measured is the effect of the level of intensity in task-oriented training. So a research team conducted a study focusing on the effects of high-intensity task-oriented training and low-intensity task-oriented training, and comparing both to more traditional rehabilitation therapy. So there were 3 groups of participants in this study. One group received high-intensity task-oriented training for 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, over 8 weeks. Another group received low-intensity task-oriented training for 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, over 8 weeks. And the third group served as a control. They received the conventional multidisciplinary rehabilitation, including physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and speech or cognitive therapy if it was needed, for 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, over the same 8 weeks. The researchers measured changes in manual dexterity, isometric hand grip, pinch grip strength, isometric muscle strength, tactile sensitivity in the thumb and index finger, cognitive function, and actual upper limb performance in daily life. And the team found that both of the groups participating in task-oriented training showed improvement without any adverse effects. So the level of intensity didn't make things better, and it didn't make things worse. However, when both of these groups were compared to the control group, the group that had only received traditional interdisciplinary rehabilitation therapy, well, the results suggested that there was a significant gain among the participants in the task-oriented training groups. So as some of you go to your rehab appointments, you might want to ask whether you could be benefiting from task-oriented training. And if you'd like more information about this study, I'll include a link to the study results in today's show notes. And while we're on the subject of rehabilitation, some of my longtime listeners might remember back in February, I had Dr. Deborah Backus on as a guest. Now, Dr. Backus is the director of multiple sclerosis research at the Shepherd Center in Atlanta. And we talked about a clinical trial that she was heading up as its co-principal investigator. The trial is called the Supervised versus Tele-Rehab Exercise Program for People with MS, or STEP for MS for short. And it's designed to answer the question, in people living with MS, does an evidence-based, individualized exercise program delivered at home via remote technology, what we'd call tele-rehab, yield comparable benefits for improving walking and mobility, participation, and overall quality of life when compared to a program that's delivered by means of a conventional facilities-based approach. In other words, will we see the same results from a rehab exercise program delivered at home that we see in a rehab exercise program that's delivered at a rehabilitation center? Finding an answer to this question could expand the use of tele-rehab, and we could see lots more people benefiting from this approach, but first, we need to do the research, and that's where you come in. This clinical trial is recruiting participants right now, and they're looking for people between the ages of 18 and 65 who are living with mild to moderate MS, have the required technology at home, and that amounts to a computer or a DVD player and a TV, and a phone. They have to have an EDSS score between 4.0 and 6.5, and of course, they need to have medical approval to participate in exercise studies. They need to be able to walk 25 feet in somewhere between 25 seconds and 3 minutes, and they need to be able to read, write, and speak English. Finally, you need to live near one of the 7 sites participating in the trial. Now, those sites are the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, Marquette University in Milwaukee, the Cleveland Clinic Mellon Foundation, the University of Colorado in Denver, the University of Georgia in Athens, and the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. So if you feel as though you fulfill the study criteria and you'd like to be a difference maker in how rehabilitation exercise is delivered in the future, please contact the research coordinator at the study site nearest you, and I'll have a link to all of that information available in today's show notes. This is an important study. It can be a game changer for so many people living with MS who find it challenging to get to their rehab appointments. So if you can participate, I hope you decide to do so. Again, please check today's show notes for a link to the study criteria and to find the necessary contact information. It's easy to imagine that someone living with MS with a high level of disability would also carry a high level of economic burden. In other words, we'd expect that someone with a high level of disability might not be able to work while still requiring extra care. And that can get to be very expensive. But what about people who are living with MS with a low level of disability? Does MS leave them with any kind of an economic burden? A research team in Spain explored this question and concluded that people living with MS with a low level of disability still face a high level of economic burden. Their study involved 199 participants who were living with MS and were being treated at 19 different MS clinics across Spain. 172 of the study participants had relapsing remitting MS, and 27 had primary progressive MS. As a group, the participants had a median EDSS score of 2.0. And just as a reminder, The EDSS, or Expanded Disability Status Scale, is a method of quantifying disability in multiple sclerosis and monitoring changes in the level of disability over time. The EDSS scale ranges from 0 to 10, and the higher the score, the higher the level of disability. An EDSS score of 2.0 equates to what's considered minimal disability. The researchers found that at the time of their MS diagnosis, 70.6% of the study participants were employed. About 9.5 years later, the number of employed study participants had decreased to 47.2%. At the time of their MS diagnosis, none of the study participants had retired from the workforce. About 9.5 years later, roughly 24% of the study participants had retired. The mean age of retirement was about 44 years old, and almost 96% of those who had retired cited MS progression as the reason. The research team was able to calculate that this early retirement due to MS carried an annual cost burden of just over $6,600. The researchers noted that caregivers, typically spouses, accompanied the study participants to their study visits, and the research team noted that these spouses indicated that they spent a minimum of over 200 hours each year providing care. That's more than a full-time job. In addition, 28.1% of the study participants also needed paid professional support for their daily activities. The mean annual cost of this informal caregiving was calculated to be about $1,500, and that doesn't take into consideration the salaries that these caregivers weren't earning by instead providing care to their spouses. So what the research team discovered is a situation where within just 10 years of diagnosis, employment income is minimal or non-existent, and the associated costs of care continue to increase. They concluded that, and I'm quoting from their report, MS is responsible for a substantial economic burden due to indirect and informal care costs, even in a population with low physical disability. Effective therapeutic interventions to improve the management of early symptoms, as well as implementing workplace strategies focused on job retention, may be essential to decrease the high economic burden of MS. If you're interested in learning more about this study, I'll include a link in today's show notes. When Mike Zimits was diagnosed with MS, he decided he could best help himself by getting into shape, so he got on a bike. Then, a bit later, he convinced his friend's sister, Catherine, to get on a bike. Catherine was serving as her brother's caregiver after her brother had been diagnosed with progressive MS. So these two people, who had each been affected differently by MS, became avid cyclists, even taking on several stages of the Tour de France. They also raised a lot of money for MS research and a lot of awareness about MS along the way. In a moment, you'll meet two exceptional MS warriors, my guests Mike Zimits and Kat Tsigakos. When MS impacted the lives of cycling enthusiasts Mike Zimits and Catherine Tsigakos, they decided that they would use cycling to raise money for MS research, raise awareness of MS, and to communicate the message that an MS diagnosis doesn't mean that you're no longer entitled to have hopes, dreams, and goals for yourself. Their track record is a strong indication that they've succeeded on all fronts, and now they're leading two upcoming cycling events for the MS Association of America. Kat and Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us, John.
Oh, of course, and I especially appreciate the opportunity to talk with the two of you today. Until progressive MS kept her off her bike, my wife Jean would start every morning with a 40-mile ride and then do the occasional century on the weekend. So it's always special for me to talk with other cyclists. And Mike, maybe you can tell us about the circumstances that led to you and Kat first connecting and getting started.
Sure. Well, I've known Kat for several years before actually starting to ride with her. Kat's brother, who was also diagnosed with MS and passed this past year, some complications due to, used to work with me in the old days at a firm that no longer exists, and we blamed the fall of 2008 on. But we used to work together, and he had MS, and he had it for about a decade before I was diagnosed. And through him, I got to know Catherine because she used to come to pick him up at the van and take care of him and things like that. And when I was diagnosed, I was told I needed to get healthy because MS, back in 1998, there weren't many drugs or disease-modifying drugs. And I was told by my first neurologist that in the physical condition I was in, that it would probably, the word he used was ravage me. I said, thank you for that optimistic note, and I went on my way. And long story short, about a year into my diagnosis and life with MS, I discovered cycling. There's a long story to that. I won't bore you with it, but I got into cycling, and 5 miles became 10, 10 became 20, 20 became 30, and then instead, let's try a century. I almost killed myself, but it was great. And along the way, Catherine, who would always donate to the MS Society and do a lot of walks while I was beginning to cycle, we said, why don't we ride together? And we formed a team, and we were fortunate enough to be invited to join Tower Hamilton in the MS Globals for 4 years running in the early 2000s, and we got to do several stages of Tour de France and the Vuelta and things like that. So it was very empowering as a person living with MS to know that I could control my life and I could climb the same mountains and the same passes and the same cols and the same descents that Lance Armstrong and Tower Hamilton and those pros did. MS didn't have to stop me, and I'm so grateful that I discovered the bike and that I discovered good friends like Catherine to share them with. That's how I got into it.
So I guess I have to ask, how long was it from the time you thought, oh, I'm going to try cycling, to the point in time where you guys were riding stages of the Tour de France?
Pretty quick, I guess 3 to 4 years. 4 years. Let's call it that way.
And just to be clear for people listening, you guys are not professional cyclists.
No, I don't have a girlish figure to be a pro cyclist. I'm way too big.
Apparently, you still managed to get in those Tour de France stages, so not too shabby for a hobbyist, I'll say that.
Yeah, and way too big means I'm not 140 pounds soaking wet. Those guys are all the tiniest human beings I've ever seen in my life, but they can ride like the wind.
Well, Kat, tell me about the MS Great 8, what the organization is, and maybe a little bit about what it's been able to accomplish.
Oh, sure. My pleasure. So as Mike mentioned to you, the power of the bike. So when my brother Peter, 10 years after his diagnosis, when he needed to use a wheelchair 10 years later, we made a deal. And he said, if I'm going to get used to wheels as this part of my life, I think you should too. I think it's time for you to start learning how to ride a bike. And my sports of choice were basketball and softball, so I had never learned to ride. So he introduced me to his dear friend Mike. And Mike, literally on a Saturday morning, a couple of months later after my brothers and Mike arranged to have a bike custom made for me, literally a push down a hill along the expressway, and that's how I learned to ride. And I'd say within 16 to 17 months, Mike and I joined a lot of top fundraisers in a ride to Europe to do the stages of the Tour de France and the Pyrenees, and we had done that for several years, so that was really beyond a dream come true. And we were fortunate to meet a few people in Europe who heard that this group of cyclists were spreading awareness about MS. And I'll never forget, an elderly woman and her daughter came to see us, and the woman said to me in French, my mom has not left the house since her diagnosis several years ago, and the fact that you all were coming to raise awareness, she is claiming her life back. And this woman proceeded to tell us, to introduce us to her mother, and the mother said, I will now have a routine. I'm going to leave my house every day, and MS does not stop me from living and doing my routines. And it was incredibly empowering that literally on the flight back, Mike and I started talking. I said, that's the type of impact that we would love to see on a daily basis, and not just for an annual ride and a trip of meeting a few people. So we looked at the cycling calendar for MS nationwide, and we saw the first ride was in the month of March, and the last ride was in the month of November. So that gave us 8 months. So we said, let's get a group together. Let's do one ride per month in a different state and see how that goes. And we literally formed the MS Grade 8 Foundation. And we met some really great cyclists in various MS chapters in their communities. And they joined forces with us to raise awareness, to give speeches, and to fundraise for MS, not just for an annual event, but all year round. How do we create this advocacy as part of our daily lives? And it became so successful that we decided a few years later to kick it up a notch. And instead of 8 individual rides, we said, let's have a destination ride. So that was an 8-day ride. And we've done several of them to date. We've done Boston to Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C. to Boston. We've done Portland, Maine to New York City with such an incredibly devoted group of cyclists. And what better way to enjoy the scenery, enjoy the camaraderie, sign up with our team, and we all have the same mission. And then you realize as we meet people during our rides, even at a red light, when people see a group of cyclists, all with our MS Grade 8 Foundation gear, they no longer ask what MS is. It's now progressed to, I not only know what MS is, but I know someone who's been impacted by it. So the power of the bike is tremendous. And we're just thrilled to be a part of it.
Do you know in the ballpark about how much fundraising the MS Grade 8 Foundation has been able to do, how much money's been raised for things like MS research?
Yeah, we put together, I believe the number someplace near, Catherine, if I'm wrong, stop me, at $1.38 million we raised over the years.
That's right.
I just appreciate so much how you guys take that old adage, go big or go home, to heart.
It didn't start off that big, but it grew. Well, it grew. We grew with the momentum. It's the power of the bike and setting the example, right? We show up, we don't give up. It's what we do.
Well, just remarkable. And now you're both leading Team MSAA in a couple of cycling events. Can you tell me about them?
Yeah, we after meeting Gina Murdoch, the CEO of the MS Grade 8, who we had crossed paths with in the past for years, we met her at a research seminar, and we were talking about the foundation and this and that and our lives on the bikes. We were off for a little while just due to Peter's lapse in health in final passing, and myself. I had a couple of non-MS related health issues that sidelined me for a few years. It just involved a little bit of pesky chemo. But we decided to come back, and we got, I got cleared for life, and Catherine's life had moved on, and we decided to come back. And while talking to Gina, we said, to get back and manage this foundation is a large undertaking to step it up on day one, but we're happy to work in concert with the MSA. And since we've never produced a bike ride before, why don't we do it for you? We know how to do it. We know how to work the market. We have relationships, and they are costly events. So I think, we both thought that we could scale it for them and make it a profitable type thing that can actually earn money to go back to the community. So we started last year. We started in our backyards. We're both in New York, doing a 100-mile bike ride. I mean, you could have done 100 or 70 or 50, but we all did the 100. Just a grassroots group of 8 people, consisting all, with the exception of one, of folks from the Grade 8 Foundation. They all came out to play from different parts of the country. And we rode 100 miles from Babylon to Montauk Point. And we raised about $40,000 for the cause. And we did it in a very nice structure, and it was put together really well. And so much so that we're doing the ride again in September, and we're doing another one similar to it in Maryland in October. So that's how we got involved. We thought it'd be really nice to be involved with an organization that represents the community. Right? We're all looking for research. We're all looking for a cure. We're all looking for an end to MS. But while we're looking, and I'm sure we will find it, folks live with MS every day. Catherine's brother lives with MS every day. I live with it every day. My friends and my colleagues are living with it every day. We also can't forget that while we're searching for that ultimate cure and that silver bullet, we have a lot of people living who will live their whole lives with MS. And they have needs. They may be financial, they may be emotional, they may be physical. And the MSAA is there to support us. They represent us. They are my community. They're me. And they're the caregivers. They represent everything that we try to do. So we could think of no better organization to partner with and lend our, for lack of a better phrase, our expertise to and really get involved with.
Yes, I think it's just tremendous that it pretty much gets the band back together. As Mike said, he's had some health issues for the past few years, and the sudden passing of my brother. Getting back on the bike was a monumental and incredibly emotional part of our lives, and to get our grade 8 devoted cyclists from various states coming to New York from I'd say a mini hiatus, and to just pick up exactly where we left off. And these rides are opportunities for the cycling community to just get together, meet a great group of individuals, people all with the same mission. And it's fun. These aren't races. These are nice, leisurely rides. It's a tremendous amount of fun. And happy to be plowing ahead.
Yeah, and just to take a springboard on what Catherine said, they're not races. And we do have a ride coming up, and it would be remiss of us not to mention it in September 13th, I believe it is, that Saturday, or 14th. It's that weekend, the Montauk ride, and it's not a race, and it's flat, and it's fun. And we have all different lengths for people of all different sizes and desires. And they should go out to the MSAA.org website and sign up. Go out to Team MSAA and sign up and join us. It's going to be a blast. It's beautiful. A lot of beach, a lot of coast, a lot of water, a lot of good food and good people. So just join us. It's a challenge, but it's not a challenge that'll kill you. It's worth the effort.
I think that you two are out redefining what it means to do something that's worth the effort. Both Kat Tsigakos and Mike Zimits, thank you for, by now, the thousands and thousands and thousands of miles that you've ridden to raise awareness about MS, to change a conversation about what it means to be diagnosed with MS, or maybe more importantly, what it doesn't have to mean when you're diagnosed with MS, for raising the funds that you've already raised and the funds that you are going to raise this fall. And thanks for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you, John.
Well, John, thank you very much for having us. We appreciate the kind words, and we hope we get some people out there. Again, support.mymsaa.org, Team MSAA. Go out there and click on it. Sign up. Join us as we have some good times in the fall. It's a nice way to end the summer. And don't be afraid. Just face it. You have MS or you care for someone with MS, just get out there and join the club. We'll have a good time.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, well, I invite you to do so right now. Subscribing to Real Talk MS is an easy way to make sure you catch every episode, and it's free. You can subscribe to the podcast everywhere you find Real Talk MS, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, or you can visit our website at realtalkms.com and look for the subscribe button on the right side of the homepage. And by the way, if you have an Amazon Echo or Echo Dot at home, all you have to do is say, Alexa, enable the Real Talk MS podcast. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.